6 essential pillars of support. After 60 stronger than family, it's 2:17 a.m. The house is silent. You're wide awake, staring at the ceiling with that cold, heavy feeling in your chest. It's not just worry, it's fear, the kind that makes your throat tighten. What happens when I can't do this alone anymore? What if my children can't or won't be there? I saw it in Martha's eyes the day after her 72nd birthday. For decades, her Sunday family dinners had been the center of her universe. Her kitchen filled with laughter, grandchildren running through the house, Martha beaming as she served her famous apple pie. "They're my everything, Dr. Bob," she would tell me, her face glowing with pride. Then the call came. Her daughter's company was relocating the family across the country. 3,000 miles away, Martha's first Sunday alone, she set the table for 8 out of habit. Then sat there for hours, the food growing cold. 3 weeks later, she called me at 2:17 a.m., her voice so broken I barely recognized it. "I feel like I've disappeared, Dr. Bob. Like I don't exist anymore. Who am I without them?" After 78 years on this earth, 43 of them as a physician, I've watched this same heartbreaking story play out hundreds of times. And I've discovered one painful truth that nobody wants to talk about. When your only foundation is family, you're building your entire life on shifting sand. This isn't about love. Your children adore you, but their lives are pulling them in 1,000 directions. Careers, their own children, financial pressures we never faced. And deep down, we all know the truth we're afraid to speak. Becoming dependent on our children transforms the relationship in ways that slowly destroy the very connection we treasure most. But what if it doesn't have to be this way? What if I told you that after working with over 8,000 patients in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, I've identified 6 pillars of support that are actually more reliable than family alone? Frameworks that have helped my patients not just survive their later years, but experience the most fulfilling chapter of their lives. Before I reveal these 6 pillars that transformed Martha's life and could transform yours, take a quick second to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Why? Because each week, I share the uncomfortable truths about aging that most doctors are afraid to tell you. Insights that have helped thousands of my patients reclaim their independence, dignity, and joy. These aren't theories from textbooks. They're battle-tested strategies from nearly 5 decades in medicine. Your simple click helps these essential truths reach others who might be lying awake at 3 a.m., feeling utterly alone in their struggles. Now let's talk about the 6 pillars that can transform the entire trajectory of your later years, starting with the foundation that makes everything else possible. Pillar 1, financial stability. Richard and I graduated medical school together. For 35 years, he was the physician everyone wanted. Brilliant diagnostician, compassionate bedside manner. The kind of doctor who remembered your children's names and called to check on you after hours. Then at 67, his wife of 40 years left him. The divorce shattered not just his heart, but his retirement plans. I still remember the look in his eyes when he told me over coffee that he'd moved into his son's basement. "I sleep on a pull-out sofa," he whispered, his voice thick with shame. I have to ask permission to use their car. Yesterday, my daughter-in-law mentioned how much their grocery bill has increased since I moved in. "Bob, I've become the very thing I spent my life dreading, a burden on my children." Let me be brutally honest. Financial stability after 60 isn't just about comfort. It's about maintaining your basic human dignity. It's about preserving the parent-child relationship instead of transforming it into caregiver-dependent. Many of us grew up with this comforting myth that family will always take care of its own. But I've watched hundreds of my patients discover the devastating reality. When you financially depend on your children, something profound changes. Not because they don't love you, but because dependence fundamentally alters the relationship in ways that slowly poison it from within. Here are the 3 financial strategies that have helped my most independent patients maintain their freedom and dignity. First, create what I call a Life Happens Fund. An emergency reserve that covers at least 6 months of basic expenses. This isn't about paranoia. It's about having the power to say no to situations that compromise your self-respect. The ability to walk away when necessary is priceless. Second, develop multiple modest income streams. Margaret, an 83-year-old widow on a teacher's pension, converted her garden shed into a charming studio apartment. The graduate student who rents it pays below market rate in exchange for handling Margaret's yard work and heavy lifting. It's beautiful symbiosis, not dependency. Third, find a financial advisor who specializes specifically in seniors' needs. The strategies that built your nest egg in your 40s and 50s can actually damage your security after 60. Here's the truth no one tells you. Financial independence isn't about being rich. It's about having options. The freedom to make choices based on what brings you joy, not what you're forced to accept out of desperation. I could have all the money in the world, but without this next pillar, I'd still end up dependent on others. Because financial stability means nothing without Pillar 2, physical health. James and William sat in my waiting room on the same day in 2017, both celebrating their 65th birthdays. Both recently retired executives. Both with loving families, comparable investment portfolios, and the same Medicare Advantage plan. They even joked about being retirement twins. I saw them both last month for their annual physicals. The contrast shook me to my core. James arrived for his appointment in a wheelchair pushed by his clearly exhausted daughter. At 70, he can't stand long enough to shower without assistance. He needs help getting dressed, preparing meals, even opening his medication bottles. His world has shrunk to the distance between his bed and his recliner. When his grandchildren visit, he watches them play from across the room, unable to get down on the floor with them. William, also 70, walked into my office right after completing a 12-day walking tour of Portugal with friends he met at a community fitness class. He showed me photos of himself climbing coastal paths and dancing at a local festival. When his grandchildren visit, they have a standing date to shoot baskets in the driveway. The heartbreaking truth? This dramatic difference isn't genetics. It isn't luck. It isn't even money. James and William made fundamentally different choices 5 years ago about how they viewed their bodies. James dismissed his gradually increasing blood pressure, the extra weight around his middle, his shortness of breath climbing stairs. "That's just part of getting older," he'd say with that dismissive wave I've come to dread. William decided to treat his body as his most valuable remaining asset. Nothing extreme. Just consistent, intentional care of the only vessel that would carry him through his remaining decades. Here's what most doctors won't tell you. After 60, the goal isn't living forever. It's maintaining your ability to wipe your own backside, to prepare your own meals, to get up from a chair without assistance. These aren't just conveniences. They're the foundation of your human dignity. After watching thousands of patients navigate their later years, here's what actually works. First, forget exercise. Embrace what I call purposeful movement instead. This isn't about marathon training or becoming a gym rat. It's about finding movement that slides naturally into your daily life and brings you genuine pleasure. For Elaine, it's tending her garden. For Michael, it's dancing in his kitchen while preparing dinner. For Robert, it's swimming with his buddies 3 mornings a week. The activity itself matters far less than the joy and consistency it brings. Second, what you put into your body becomes exponentially more important after 60. Your digestive system literally changes, absorbing fewer nutrients from the same foods you've always eaten. This isn't about dieting or deprivation. It's about treating every bite as an opportunity to nourish the only body you'll ever have. Third, and I cannot stress this enough, preventive care becomes your lifeline. I understand the temptation to avoid checkups because you don't want bad news. I've had patients miss appointments for years, only to finally come in when the pain became unbearable. And by then their options were severely limited. Look at this simple movement. 3 minutes of this while brushing your teeth can cut your fall risk by nearly 40%. And falls, not heart attacks, not cancer, are what trigger the downward spiral of dependency for most of my patients. William does this every morning and evening without fail. James thought it was silly when I recommended it 5 years ago, but even with perfect physical health, humans wither in isolation. Which brings us to the third pillar that has made all the difference for my most thriving patients. Pillar 3, social circle. I don't need friends. I have my family. These were the words of Eleanor, an 80-year-old widow who had centered her entire social life around her 3 children and their families. When her youngest son accepted a 2-year international assignment, Eleanor fell into a depression so severe she couldn't get out of bed. Her physical health deteriorated rapidly, and within months, she needed assisted living. Not because she couldn't physically care for herself, but because isolation had dismantled her will to do so. The science on this is clear and sobering. Social isolation carries the same health risks as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's more dangerous than obesity, high blood pressure, or physical inactivity. Yet I've observed a troubling pattern among my patients over 60. As they age, many allow their social circles to shrink until family becomes their only meaningful connection to the world. This isn't just risky, it's unsustainable. Your children and grandchildren, with all their love, cannot and should not be your entire social world. They have their own lives to build, their own challenges to face. And the parent-child relationship, while precious, cannot provide the peer understanding that comes from friendships with those sharing your life stage. Here's my strategy for building a robust social circle after 60. First, diversity is key. Aim to develop what I call your 5 core connections. A friend you can call at 2 a.m. in an emergency. A friend who makes you laugh. A friend who shares a hobby or interest. A friend who challenges your thinking. And a friend from a different generation who keeps you connected to changing perspectives. Second, consistency matters more than intensity. Weekly coffee with a neighbor builds stronger bonds than annual reunions with old friends. Look for opportunities for regular, low-pressure social connection in your community. Third, give yourself permission to outgrow relationships that no longer serve you. Many of my patients cling to draining relationships out of habit or history. Remember, at this stage of life, your time and emotional energy are precious resources. Technology has transformed the possibilities for social connection after 60. Jean, an 87-year-old patient with limited mobility, has built a vibrant community through a book club that meets via video chat. Distance is no longer the barrier it once was. But meaningful connections need a foundation. Which brings us to our 4th pillar, something I've found to be absolutely essential for thriving in your later years. Pillar 4, sense of purpose. Frank retired at 65 after 40 years as a school principal. "I'm going to spend my days golfing and visiting the grandkids," he told me during his pre-retirement physical. Nothing else on the agenda. 6 months later, he was in my office with soaring blood pressure and insomnia. "I feel useless, Doc," he confessed. "Like I've been put out to pasture. The grandkids are in school most days, and it turns out I only really enjoy golfing once a week." What Frank was experiencing wasn't unusual. It was the purpose vacuum, the sudden absence of the role that had given structure and meaning to his days for decades. Here's a truth society rarely acknowledges. Retirement from work should never mean retirement from purpose. In fact, a clear sense of purpose becomes more vital after 60, not less. Research from the Rush University Medical Center found that people with high purpose in life were 2.4 times less likely to develop Alzheimer's disease. Other studies show purpose reduces heart attack risk, improves sleep quality, and lowers stress hormone levels. Purpose isn't just fulfilling, it's protective. But finding purpose after a lifetime of career and family focus requires intentional rebuilding. Here's my approach. First, identify your unique wisdom contribution, the knowledge, experience, or perspective that only someone with your specific life journey can offer. For Frank, this was his decades of educational experience, which he eventually channeled into mentoring new principals. Second, look for needs in your community that align with your strengths. Purpose often lives in the intersection between what you're good at and what others need. Third, start small but commit consistently. Purpose doesn't require grand gestures. Helena, an 86-year-old former accountant, finds deep purpose in teaching financial literacy at her local library twice a month. Dr. Bob gestures to a wall of thank you cards visible in the background. At 78, I still practice medicine part-time, not because I need to, but because guiding patients through the journey of aging gives my life profound meaning. Your purpose might look entirely different, but the need for it is universal. However, even with purpose, life after 60 brings challenges that test our emotional foundations. Pillar 5. Emotional resilience. When Sarah's husband of 52 years died unexpectedly, her adult children moved her into her daughter's home, surrounded her with grandchildren, and tried to fill every moment with activity and care. 6 months later, Sarah told me during an appointment, "They won't let me grieve. They're so uncomfortable with my pain that they try to distract me from the very emotions I need to process. I love them deeply, but I need to learn to carry this loss my own way. This highlights a crucial truth. Family love, while precious, cannot substitute for inner emotional resilience. Your children can support you, but they cannot and should not be responsible for your emotional well-being. After 60, life delivers losses at an accelerating pace. Friends die. Health challenges emerge. Roles change. Your ability to adapt to these changes without being emotionally devastated depends on resilience, the psychological muscle that allows you to bend without breaking. The good news is that emotional resilience can be developed at any age. Here's how I guide my patients. First, normalize difficult emotions instead of avoiding them. Sadness, fear, and grief are not signs of weakness. They're normal human responses to real losses. Allowing yourself to feel these emotions fully is the first step to moving through them. Second, practice what psychologists call beneficial distancing, the ability to experience emotions without being completely identified with them. Meditation and mindfulness practice build this capacity over time. Third, maintain your decision-making autonomy even during difficult times. Many well-meaning families try to take over when a parent is struggling emotionally, but this often undermines long-term resilience. Simple practices like regular journaling can significantly strengthen emotional resilience. Clara, an 83-year-old patient, credits her daily writing practice with helping her navigate the loss of her sister, her best friend, and a serious health diagnosis within a single year. But even with emotional resilience, the final pillar is what ultimately determines how successfully you navigate the inevitable changes that come with aging. Pillar 6. Adaptability. Two patients learned they needed to downsize from their longtime family homes. Both were 75. Both had lived in their houses for over 40 years. Both had raised children in these cherished spaces. Robert approached the transition with rigid resistance. Each suggestion was met with, "That's not how we've always done it," or, "At my age, I shouldn't have to change." The process became increasingly stressful. His blood pressure skyrocketed, and he eventually moved into his new place, bitter and resentful. Patricia approached the same challenge with curiosity. "I wonder what opportunities this smaller space might open up," she mused. She researched new organizational systems, embraced the chance to reimagine her living environment, and arrived at her new home energized by the possibilities. Same circumstance, dramatically different experiences, all because of adaptability. If there's one trait I've seen consistently in patients who thrive into their 80s and 90s, it's this capacity to adapt to changing circumstances without losing their sense of self. Adaptability isn't about passive acceptance. It's about active engagement with new realities. Here's what builds adaptability after 60. First, cultivate what psychologists call a growth mindset, the belief that you can develop new capabilities throughout your entire life. The moment you decide you're too old to learn, you begin a rapid cognitive decline. Second, regularly expose yourself to new experiences, even small ones. Try new foods. Take different routes to familiar places. Listen to music outside your usual preferences. These small stretches maintain cognitive flexibility. Third, embrace technology selectively. You don't need to master every new app or device, but choosing key technologies that support your independence is crucial. My 92-year-old patient Dorothy uses ride-sharing apps that allow her to maintain her active social life despite no longer driving. When Dorothy's children moved to different states, she could have become isolated and dependent on their visits. Instead, she learned video calling, joined Facebook to see family photos, and uses meal delivery services when grocery shopping is difficult. Her adaptability has allowed her to maintain deep family connections without becoming dependent on their physical presence. Conclusion. Camera pulls back to show Dr. Bob in his full setting as gentle, inspiring music begins. I want you to imagine two paths stretching before you. One leads to what I call fragile aging, where your happiness, your security, even your basic dignity depends entirely on your children's capacity to support you. Where every health setback, every financial challenge pushes you further into dependency. Where your world grows smaller each year until it shrinks to the four walls around you. The other path, the one I've watched my most vibrant patients create, is built on these 6 pillars we've discussed. Financial stability, physical health, social connections, sense of purpose, emotional resilience, and adaptability. This isn't about pushing family away. It's the opposite. It's about showing up in those precious relationships as your full, vibrant self, not as a bundle of needs and dependencies. It's about being the parent your children still want to call for advice, not the parent they call out of obligation. Remember Martha? The woman who called me at 2 a.m. devastated by her daughter's move? Last month at 78, Martha video called me from her living room where she was hosting her weekly poetry circle. She had just returned from visiting her daughter's family in Seattle, her third visit this year. But now these visits come from a place of joy, not desperate need. "The strangest thing has happened, Dr. Bob," she told me. "My relationship with my daughter has completely transformed. We laugh together like we did when she was young, without all that pressure, that unspoken worry about who will take care of mom. We can just be mother and daughter again. It's the most unexpected gift." I've watched too many of my patients learn these lessons the hardest way possible. After the heart attack that leaves them unable to dress themselves, after burning out their family relationships with neediness, after losing their sense of self completely. My deepest hope is that by sharing these pillars with you today, you can begin strengthening them now while you have the energy, clarity, and freedom to choose your path. If these insights have touched something in you today, please take 2 seconds to subscribe and click that notification bell. Your simple action helps these crucial conversations reach others who might be lying awake tonight, terrified of becoming a burden to their children. And if you know someone struggling with these very fears, perhaps a friend navigating retirement, or your own parent growing increasingly dependent, share this video. It might be the most important gift you could give them. In the comments, I'd love to know, which of these 6 pillars feels strongest in your life right now? Which needs the most attention? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today to find their courage. Remember this truth. Aging isn't about inevitable decline and growing dependency. It's about intentional adaptation. With these 6 pillars as your foundation, your later years won't be a burden to endure. They can become the most liberated, authentic chapter of your entire life. Dr. Bob smiles warmly, speaking from the heart. This is Dr. Bob, reminding you that the greatest gift you can give your family isn't your dependency. It's your vibrant, engaged, independent presence in their lives for as long as possible.